One thing I get asked a lot is, how do you sustain your maps? How do you seem to never run out of tier 16 maps? Why am I struggling on map sustain? And a couple months ago, I made a video in some ways addressing that, and to talk about the fact that the sky was not falling and map sustain was not getting nerfed out of the game. However, I didn't go into too much detail there about the mechanics of how you go about sustaining maps. I was merely taking a little bit of an overview to correct the idea and reassure people that they were not going to be stuck in white maps waiting for one map to drop every 100 they run. So let's get into a little bit about why I think people struggle with map sustain and what they can do to fix it. Personally, I think the biggest reason behind why people struggle on map sustain is a lack of investment. You should invest as much as possible into each map. It might seem strange to spend 200 chaos or even 2000 chaos on supplies to do your mapping. In the end, after you run the 100 maps or whatever that you bought those supplies for, you will come out way ahead. Like all other areas of Path of Exile, the more you invest, the more you get out of it. I also think there are some bad pieces of advice that get floated around a lot when it comes to map sustain, such as you should just try to complete maps as fast as possible, skipping all master content, all side content, and anything that isn't just running to the boss and picking up loot along the way. This is false. Master missions are free. You get them from killing bosses, and they are an excellent source of additional sustain and additional value, be it Einhar for beasts, Alva for temples, which can give some good double corrupted items, some temple mods, or good map drops from map rooms or just in the temple itself, or Delve, where the cities are very rewarding, fossils are profitable, you name it. Betrayal drops less maps, but has better direct rewards. And of course, Zana is a great way to get maps because, one, her mission is a free map that is already rolled for you. It can include rare boss maps that you won't find too easily otherwise. And it refreshes her shop, which lets you buy even more maps, which can also be rare boss maps, or it can be things with the Zana's modifier, which will cause the map to have significantly better drops. So you should absolutely run master missions on every map. Also, some people say, oh, you should just transmute your white maps. Don't do that. The number of mods on a map determines how rewarding it is. If you're transmuting and only putting 2 mods on a map, as opposed to the 6 to 8 that you can have on an alch map, you're getting so little for your time that you're actually losing currency rather than gaining it by running that map. So what should you do to sustain your maps and to get profitable returns from your mapping? I'm going to start with a minimum baseline of what you should do. Do not do less than this. I'm going to call this level 0. Chisel your map, alch it, reroll any bad mods, corrupt it, sextant the watchstones, use sacrifice fragments, and then add a master mission. Keep in mind, it is pretty easy to sustain chisels these days. You should again be able to sustain alchs as well. Pick up a few rares if you're in SSF, pick up a few uniques and vendor them. Obviously, yes, occasionally you will get maps that you can't run. And that's unfortunate. If you have a second character or you have a character like a miner that can run all map mods, all the better, you can run those corrupted nasty maps on that character. If not, it's not a big deal. The amount of returns will far outweigh what you are putting in. And if you're on a trade league, you can sell those bad maps because a bad map for you might be a real nice juicy map for someone else. Speaking of trade league, if you're in a trade league, I suggest not using sacrifice fragments. Though they do offer 15% area quant to your map, it's not really great. You can get a lot more value if you instead use scarabs. Scarabs are kind of like a sextant in that they add mobs to your map, they have their own mechanics, and they can interact with some league mechanics, such as by adding Legion or Metamorph to your maps. I would absolutely do this whenever you can. From my experience in recent leagues, scarabs have not been particularly expensive. For 5 chaos or less, you can put 3 or 4 of them on your map. If you are in a trade league, I would absolutely buy the Maraketh or Templar emblem to unlock the 5-slot map device. I would absolutely use prophecies, such as Tempests or Plagues, on as many maps as possible, buy them in bulk if you need to, and I would always spend a few Chaos Orbs to use the Zana Atlas device to put an additional mod on your maps, such as contains... Bloodlines tend to mean magic packs. Magic packs are known for being some of the best sources of map drops. You could instead do Harbinger. They also have a decent amount of magic enemies that drop maps. It's a little harder in SSF, but you should do it if you can. I understand not having the chaos to do it all the time. In Trade League, you should absolutely do it all the time. The maps you get back and the other drops you get back, such as Ancient Shards from Harbingers, will more than pay for this, and you will see an exponential net positive gain. Now, let's say you've been doing all of that, and you want to go from sustaining to over-sustaining. This is where what I would call level 2 comes in. Level 2 is what I tend to do. It's a little more high-end. You definitely have to invest more in your maps, but again, it pays out exponentially, so it is well worth doing. To start with, you can use advanced prophecies such as Possessed Foe, Val Winds, or Monstrous Treasure. Possessed Foe, when combined with Sextants that give Scarab rewards, will grant you guaranteed Scarabs in your map as long as you can put some unique enemies in there, such as via Warbands or via Exiles. Val Winds means you can force items to be corrupted. Items drop corrupted, you can get Sixlings. Corrupted Sixlings vendor for Divine Orbs. Divine Orbs tend to be worth 10 to 20 Chaos, depending on the league and the time in the league. Monstrous Treasure is excellent because it can take advantage of the Strongbox enemies have 500% increased quantity, which means your map now has 500% quantity on almost all enemies. It is at this point that I would also consider using Ivory Watchstones, such as War Between the Stars, to add additional Shaper or Elder enemies, or consider something like Booming Populace to add more mobs to your map. More mobs equals more returns, and it scales exponentially off of everything else. Speaking of exponential scaling, why not throw on a Delirium Orb? Doesn't have to be a good Delirium Orb, just has to be any Delirium Orb. This will make the map a little bit more difficult. However, you can build up Delirium rewards, and some of those Delirium rewards can be extremely profitable. Now, you might be saying, but aren't those orbs expensive? And yes, some of the orbs are expensive, such as the Skittering Delirium Orb, but you could use the absolute minimum cheapest one. The reward from it might be bad, the random reward you get might be good. How profitable this is and how worth doing this is really does depend from league to league. It will vary based on the price of the orbs themselves, the value of the drops that they have, how much Simulacrum sells for, how much Cluster Jewels sell for, all of these various factors. I can't say it will be profitable to use a Delirium Orb at all times during all leagues, but most of the time, during most leagues, the rewards will outweigh the costs. If you are looking for a map to put a little bit extra investment into, be it trying to set up for Monstrous Treasure, use Val Winds, or whatever, and you're not sure, should I do it on this map or that map, or when should I do the extra investment that I can't necessarily afford or do not want to do all the time, put it on the maps that have additional mobs from the Conquerors. This is where you get the best bang for your buck because those maps have a large number of additional enemies. The Conqueror enemies will, of course, be scaled by all of your additional layers of investment. They'll drop more stuff, they'll drop better stuff, and you will get an overall better return on investment. So watch your Conqueror spawns, watch the influence, and when that ticks over, invest in that map. So I hope these 3 levels of investment have helped you understand better what you can do to increase your map sustain and, in general, increase returns from your mapping. There are levels of investment beyond this. However, those are largely out of the means of most players, and not something that you really need to do, quite frankly. It gets extremely expensive, it requires specialized builds, you need things like a headhunter, and so it's just beyond the scope of today's video. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found this helpful. Please tell me in the comments below what your experiences with map sustain have been, and how many of these things you've been doing already. Do you tend to get a lot of maps? Do you tend to find yourself struggling at any point? Have you done most of these methods, or are some of these new to you? I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you again, and stay sane, Exiles.